People who used to do burglary for a living, what is the scariest thing you've seen in someone's house? It wasn't really a burglary, but unlawful entry simply because I could. I decided to try my luck on an older house after I noticed they went on vacation. There was a room hidden behind furniture that I managed to get to, but not into because the door wouldn't fully open without completely moving the furniture. The smell inside was unholy, like death and bleach. I sent an anonymous tip to the police. It turned out they were basically luring people's pets in and dissecting them alive. To those that are curious, I used to do this kind of as a form of joyriding except in houses. Break in, walk around, and leave everything more or less untouched. Not the best thing to do as an early teen kid, but when you have a friend's dad who thought it was smart enough to teach kids how to pick locks, you kind of feel you need to use it. In this case, him committing burglary, or more accurately unlawful entry, probably ended up saving the lives of tons of animals in that neighborhood, because how else would people have figured this out ever? He also added that he stopped a house or two after finding this because he was afraid at that point of what he might find. The next example is from someone who said, when I was 14 years old, I broke into a neighbor's house and looked around. I found a big stash of Polaroids of some of my friends naked. Most of them were younger than me. I just stayed quiet for about 2 weeks trying to figure it out. Then I broke back in and took a couple of pictures of my best friends and asked them about it. Neither of them had a clue how they were taken and couldn't even remember being over at that couple's house. One of my friends told his older sister, who then went and confronted the wife. She said she didn't know anything about it, but when he came home that evening, all hell broke loose. She had her bags packed and was gone that night. The next day, the guy stopped on his way to work and threatened us for messing up his marriage. His house burned down a couple of days later while he was at work. We never ever spoke of it again. What? So I guess the OP here didn't exactly figure out how this happened, because how could the kids not know about it unless he was sneaking around where these kids were, or maybe he somehow lured them in while they were unconscious, something crazy like that. It must have been something bad enough that the wife would pack all of her bags and leave, but to have the idea in your mind that it was the kid's fault for messing up his marriage when he was doing this to kids in his neighborhood is sick. Next up is a story about breaking into a building and experiencing something pretty scary. The university I went to was a very old campus built around 1850. It started as a women's college with one building and grew over the last 150 years to include a few other modern buildings. The central old buildings were always empty and constantly under construction, but it seemed like progress was very slow. It was strictly off limits with threats of being expelled to any other students caught within. I broke in 3 to 4 times with a friend. The first time we did some recon. The building was a squared U shape with a fenced-in courtyard where the school kept landscaping equipment. It was snowing quite hard, dampening the sound nicely, and it was around 1 a.m. We hopped the fence and looked for access. Everything was locked and we didn't want to break anything yet to get in. We took some pictures and noted the rooms we would try to break in through. My friend went to hop back over the fence, lost his balance, and checked his groin while I attempted to spot him. At that moment, I heard a young girl's chuckle standing next to me, clear as day. I looked over my shoulder to see nothing, but heard another giggle. I jumped over the fence and sprinted back to my dorm. The second time we actually accessed the building, we broke a window to unlock and crawled into the basement. We found a large 3-story spiral staircase that was beautiful and began to climb on top. We could hear the eerie sound of what reminded me of a record skipping over and over mixed with chanting. We got to the top and found a plastic divider blocking the wall, presumably for dust or asbestos. The sound was pretty loud at this point, seemed to be coming from the opposite end of the building, maybe 50 yards away. My friend sticks a knife through the plastic to crawl through, and everything goes silent. We continue and find a room full of several hundred dead pigeons. We decide to leave. The last time we broke in, we took 2 more friends with us. Again, we made it to the top of the staircase, but decided to explore the rooms at the top. We found a very large room with high ceilings, a huge fireplace with a beautiful mantle overlooking the campus. I see campus security in their patrol vehicle about a block away, but I don't think he sees us. Suddenly, we hear the sounds of footsteps coming up the staircase. We freeze and line up against the wall closest the entry to the room. The steps clearly come within feet of the entry and then stop. My heart is pounding. I'm thinking it's security and we're caught. I'm closest to the entry and the guy behind me is poking me to look. I lean forward and around the door frame into the hall to see nothing waiting for us. Well, that one was a lot more scary than I expected. The very first time they broke in, when he heard a little girl laughing, that's when I would be out of there and never come back. How did he hear that while his friend was trying to jump over and then think, oh yeah, it's fine, I'll come back here, no problem? I mean, did he not tell his friend what he heard? Did his friend hear this sound? I mean, this whole thing sounds horrifying. And if that wasn't enough, how could finding a room full of hundreds of dead pigeons not be enough to just get out of there and not come back? Or at least try and come during the day. Maybe they didn't want to come during the day because they didn't want to get caught, but this was a very creepy one. Let me know what you would do if you were in this situation and you looked around the corner and there was no one there. This next story starts off with someone saying they're not sure if this applies because it technically wasn't burglary, but it definitely was trespassing in private property and probably breaking and entering too. I was around 16 years old at the time and went to my grandma's house to hang out with some friends who lived nearby for the weekend and take care of her dog while she was out of town. I showed up at around 4 o'clock and it was around 4:30 p.m. when my friends showed up on their bikes. We started out riding down the dirt country roads for a few hours and got so hot we decided to ride back toward town to buy something to drink. As we were riding, we passed this huge dilapidated farmhouse. For some reason I had to stop and stare at it. I asked my friends if they wanted to explore it and the barn behind it after we got our pops and Arizona teas, and they agreed because they had never went in before either. An hour or so later, we had got our refreshments, went back to my grandma's, got a backpack for flashlights and a small bolt-action .22 rifle in case of animals like coyotes or any other predators that may be living inside by now. We entered the house through a shattered basement window, and all three immediately turned on our flashlights to cut through the pitch dark. It smelled like any 100-plus-year-old basement would smell like, I guess, and the house was definitely spooky but nothing out of the ordinary. Our other friends showed up, so we exited the house. At this point it was getting dark, but we didn't care because we had a rifle, flashlights, and an extra person. We also weren't too worried about the predatory animals at this point because there seemed to be no sign of any of them. We were also close to finishing half a gallon of peppermint schnapps between the four of us in the 45 minutes since my third friend had been there. We kept swinging the bottle and talking amongst ourselves as we walked towards the big red 4-floor barn. It was huge, so we couldn't tell exactly how far it was, and by the time we actually got to it, the bottle was gone, the sun had fully set, and we had quit talking, and we were just silently walking with our flashlights wanting to get there so we could stop walking and smoke. As we got within 100 feet or so, we see a light coming from a small round window at the top of the barn. 50 feet, we notice an awful smell that I cannot describe in words. We keep walking. 25 feet, we hear loud rustling and smacking sounds from inside the barn, and the light was visible through the small hole in the wall on the right side of the barn shining into a bush, and we were dead. Silent. We crept to the hole behind the bush, and I wish I wouldn't have looked inside because I'm still not 1000% sure what I saw. There was blood, lots of it, covering every inch of the dirt floor, splattered like paint on everything I could see, and many clumps of what I could only imagine was some type of flesh. It took about 2 minutes for all of us to collectively process what was happening and all start running back towards our bike at the house. The 25 to 30 minute walk was sprinted in what seemed like 30 seconds. I was third in line and never looked back once. My friend in front of me did, and the look of horror on his face in my flashlight assures me to this day that I'm happy I didn't. My friend behind me also looked over his shoulder while running. We got back to my grandma's house in record time, all sloshed as skunk still, shaking and out of breath. As soon as we got to the breezeway door and locked it, and the one on the opposite side of the breezeway, we all simultaneously slumped against the wall and sat down trying to calm ourselves and each other and talk about it. I asked my friend who was in front of me and the friend who was behind me on the mad dash back to the bikes what they saw when they looked back. They both gave me the same description of multiple black outlines chasing us through the almost pitch dark night. Needless to say, we couldn't get any sleep until the sun came up. This one sounds like it's straight out of a horror film. The multiple dark black outlines, I mean, what are they trying to say? Are those monsters? What was in that hole? What kind of flesh was that? There's so many questions I have after seeing this. He actually added afterwards that he's happy he didn't look back. He could hear the footsteps on the gravel behind us, and when he pointed the rifle in that direction, he didn't see anything still coming towards them, but he was sure they were still watching because he could feel it. And also that he had nightmares for about 5 to 6 months after this happened, but he's pretty much over it, he thinks. Yeah, so if these were actually killers that were in this hole doing something that involved killing, and then they found these kids and they were chasing after them, I don't really think that having a .22 LR would stop them if they're running full force at them trying to stop these kids from leaving. I think probably what they did was the best thing to do, was to just run as fast as they possibly can and get out of there. This whole situation almost kind of reminds me of the plot of Jeepers Creepers, where Justin Long and his sister stop at that little barn that has a hole also, and inside of that there's all the bodies where Jeepers Creepers, I guess, collected them. This next one has to do with breaking into an old lady's house. Back when my friends and I were stupid teenagers and horribly influenced by gangs, we thought it would be fun to break into someone's house as an easy way to get money. We broke into this old lady's house through her window, and she had lots of valuable jewelry and a wallet filled with $100 bills. We were all saying, "We hit the jackpot, guys." My friends were taking her jewelry and money, and I saw that there was a door at the end and had a big sign that said private. Me being stupid, I opened it. My heart dropped. This lady must have been a part of a cult or something, because she had the star on the floor, candles, posters of people I didn't even know with faces smeared in blood or scratched up, and worst of all, there was a cross with a body and a deer head on top, bleeding with its eyes sewn up. I yelled and told them let's go. Before we left, we put everything back. Didn't even bother to take her things, because Lord knows how she got the jewelry and money. I obviously closed that door and left. That was the only and last time we did that. Yeah, these guys probably would have been cursed if they stole this money. The next thing they know, they start having all sorts of weird symptoms from different curses that could happen. There's no way you're gonna rob somebody and they're not gonna have some sort of vengeful plan to get back at you. And if she found out who they were, then that's gonna be a GG. So those were a lot more creepy than I expected, but what do you guys think would be the scariest thing to find inside of a house during a burglary? Leave your suggestions down below in the comments for the next video. Subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on and drop a thumbs up. See you guys in the next one.